that this happened at night when I was already asleep. My young nephew Carl tried to do this and I couldn't resist. I'm not proud of it, but listen to this story until the end. It's one of the craziest stories you'll ever hear. So, my young nephew Carl, who recently turned 19, had made the long journey from across the country to spend a few days catching up with me. We hadn't seen each other in years, not since he was a wiry teen and I was still figuring out my own path. But now, standing at my door, Carl looked different, taller, sure, but more confident, with the kind of ease and self-assurance that can only come from time and a bit of life experience. His once short hair had grown into loose curls that framed his face, and he had an athletic build, evidence of his dedication to something I knew nothing about, probably a sport or maybe the gym. I realized I was staring a bit too long, and a strange feeling crept in, that odd mix of nostalgia and curiosity, almost like I was seeing him for the first time. He laughed at something, and it pulled me back to reality, where I was quick to shake off any unnecessary thoughts. We were friends, close ones once, and that was all there was to it. But if only I had known how the next few days would go, how easily memories would flood back, bringing up feelings I hadn't anticipated. That evening Carl and I sat on the worn-out couch in my small living room, a few empty cider bottles and scattered snacks between us as we talked about life in that raw, honest way that seems to only happen late at night. The room was dim, with just a single lamp on, casting a soft glow that made the space feel even cozier, almost protective. He asked me why I'm still alone in my 35 years old. Told Carl that I hadn't been in a relationship in years, mostly because of a nagging fear of being open with who I really was. Though I'd always known I was gay, I'd kept it close, never quite finding the courage to live that truth fully. Coming out had been a slow, private journey for me, and as the words left my mouth, I felt a strange mix of relief and trepidation. To my surprise, Carl listened quietly, his gaze steady, and in his eyes, I saw not pity or surprise, but deep empathy. There was something there that went beyond the typical "I understand" you get when you open up. It was as though he was mirroring a truth he'd been holding himself. Then he admitted something that made my heart skip. Carl was also gay. He hadn't come out to anyone before and had spent years wrestling with what he called a strange, silent shame that kept him from exploring his identity. The weight of it had clearly taken a toll, and his voice cracked as he described the fear, the pressure, the inner conflict. He'd always brushed aside the thought of ever being truly open, thinking it was safer, simpler to keep things hidden. But as he spoke, I saw years of tension in him give way, like he was finally giving himself permission to accept a truth he'd been suppressing for too long. And then, quietly, tears welled up in his eyes. At first, they were just tiny drops, barely visible in the dim light, but they grew until they traced soft lines down his cheeks, glistening under the glow of the lamp. Carl, the strong, self-assured guy I'd always admired, sat across from me, his vulnerability laid bare. Seeing him like that made my chest tighten. Without a second thought, I moved closer and wrapped an arm around his shoulders, feeling his body relax against mine as I told him softly that he was allowed to be exactly who he was, that he didn't need to hide or run from any part of himself. For a while, we just stayed like that, me offering comfort as he released years of pent-up emotion. And I felt a connection with him that went beyond words, a silent promise of understanding and acceptance. As I pulled back slightly to look at him, he met my gaze, and I could see a shift in his expression. It was as though something had clicked, a realization that neither of us were alone in this experience. We shared an unspoken bond, and in that moment, Carl leaned in and, without hesitation, pressed his lips to mine. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but there was an intensity behind it that spoke of years of buried feelings, finally given permission to surface. For a moment, time seemed to blur, and everything around us faded, leaving just the warmth of his hand on my cheek and the soft, tender movement of his lips. It was a strange, unexpected moment, one I hadn't anticipated, but I didn't pull away. There was a sweetness to it, a tenderness that was new yet felt strangely familiar. My heart pounded as we sat there, our faces close, sharing something deeper than words. I wasn't sure if it was the cider or the late hour, but something about the atmosphere made everything feel effortless, natural. After that intense moment of connection, everything changed between Carl and me. The air in the room felt different, charged with a mixture of excitement and vulnerability. We had spent years building a friendship, and now, in a matter of moments, it had transformed into something deeper, something that felt so incredibly real yet fragile at the same time. It was a chilly night, the kind that makes you want to curl up under a blanket with someone you care about. The dim lighting in the living room set a cozy tone, casting gentle shadows on the walls. We had just finished that bottle of cider, and the warmth from the alcohol mingled with the warmth of our shared experience. There was something about the atmosphere that encouraged us to let our guards down further, and I could feel that unspoken tension hanging between us like a low-hanging cloud ready to burst. As we settled back into the couch, I could see the uncertainty in Carl's eyes, mirroring my own. We had crossed a line, and now the question loomed, where do we go from here? But instead of retreating back into the safety of our friendship, something compelled me to lean closer. I reached for his hand, tentatively at first, and when he didn't pull away, I felt a rush of relief. Our fingers intertwined, and it felt both familiar and thrilling, like we were discovering a new part of our connection that had been lurking beneath the surface for years. With a soft smile, I brushed my thumb across his knuckles, and he let out a quiet breath, a sound that seemed to fill the space around us with more warmth. It was in that moment that I decided to take the plunge. I leaned in, my heart racing, and pressed my lips against his again. This time, it was softer, more exploratory. It was as if we were both discovering this new territory together, allowing ourselves to be vulnerable. His lips were warm and inviting, and as we kissed, the world outside faded away. I could feel the tension melting between us, replaced by a gentle wave of affection. The kiss deepened, slow and tender, as we both began to lose ourselves in the sensation. I could taste the sweetness of the cider on his lips, and it only intensified the moment. It was intoxicating, not just the drink, but the feeling of being so close to someone who understood me in ways I hadn't even realized I needed. We began to explore, our kisses becoming more urgent yet still laced with gentleness. It was as if we were learning each other all over again, mapping out uncharted territory that had always been there but hidden beneath layers of friendship. His hands moved to my hair, fingers threading through it as he pulled me closer, and I felt a surge of warmth wash over me. As we continued, the kisses shifted from our lips to the soft skin of our cheeks, to our foreheads, and down to the delicate curves of our necks. I felt his breath against my skin, and it sent shivers down my spine. The intimacy of the moment was overwhelming. It was a dance of trust and discovery, and I wanted to soak in every second. I could feel the world around us blur. Nothing else mattered except for the connection we were building in that space. I wanted to memorize the way he felt against me, the way his touch ignited something within. Every gentle caress and lingering kiss felt like an unspoken promise of what was to come. It was as if the universe had aligned, bringing us to this point where we could finally express the feelings we had kept bottled up for so long. Encouraged by the softness of his touch, I moved my hands down his sides, feeling the muscles beneath his fitted shirt. There was something thrilling about the vulnerability of the moment, a silent agreement that we were both stepping into uncharted territory together. I could feel the tension in the air, and it only fueled my desire to explore every inch of him. Carl's hands slipped beneath the hem of my shirt, and I shivered as his warm fingers grazed my skin. The sensation was electrifying, awakening a part of me that had longed for this kind of intimacy. I met his gaze, and in his eyes, I found a reflection of my own feelings, curiosity, excitement, and an undeniable connection that anchored us in the moment. With a gentle pull, I guided him to explore my torso, tracing his fingertips across my chest and down to my abdomen. Each movement was deliberate, each touch igniting a fire that spread through my body. I could see the way his expression shifted, how his eyes widened with wonder as he discovered the unique landscape of my body. There was an unspoken understanding between us. We were not merely touching but communicating through our exploration, sharing emotions that had been buried for far too long. As our hands roamed, the kisses deepened again, becoming more fervent, more passionate. I felt Carl's breath quicken against my lips as his fingers moved lower, brushing against my sides. The intimacy of the moment felt overwhelming, like we were both suspended in time, completely immersed in each other. I responded instinctively, leaning into his touch, inviting him to explore more, to discover the depths of our connection. I shifted slightly, giving him more access, and he took the invitation to heart. His hands began to travel along my waist, exploring the curve of my hips with a gentleness that sent shivers down my spine. Each caress was a promise, a silent vow that we were embarking on this journey together, not just as friends, but as something deeper, more profound. Feeling emboldened, I let my fingers trail down his back, exploring the toned muscles that had transformed over the years. The warmth of his skin was intoxicating, and I marveled at the way he responded to my touch, the way his breath hitched when I brushed against his spine. It was an intimate exchange, each touch sending a jolt of connection that only seemed to deepen the bond we shared. With every gentle caress and lingering kiss, we began to understand each other in a way that transcended words. I could feel the emotions coursing through us, creating an unbreakable thread of intimacy. It was as if we were piecing together a puzzle, revealing layers of ourselves that had been hidden for so long. Carl shifted closer, and I felt the warmth of his body enveloping me. Our movements became more synchronized, a dance of exploration and discovery. I traced my fingers along his arms, feeling the strength and definition of his physique. He responded by pulling me in tighter, his touch reassuring yet filled with an urgency that matched the growing intensity of the moment. Our kisses became more fervent, and I could feel the heat rising between us as we explored one another with an insatiable curiosity. I moved my hands to his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath my fingertips. It was a reminder of the connection we were forging, an understanding that transcended the physical. The intimacy deepened as we began to shed our layers, not just of clothing, but of emotional barriers that had kept us at a distance for so long. With each removal, we unveiled not only our bodies, but also our vulnerabilities, laying bare the fears and hopes that had shaped our lives. When our skin finally met in its entirety, it was as if the world around us dissolved into nothingness. Every brush of skin felt electric, a testament to the bond we had formed. It was a gentle exploration, an awakening of senses that left us both breathless. The intimacy we shared was a beautiful blend of passion and tenderness, a symphony of movement that spoke of trust and desire. As our bodies moved together in a rhythm that felt instinctual, I marveled at how seamlessly we fit together. It was as if we had been designed to complement each other, to find solace in each other's embrace. I could feel Carl's warmth radiating against me, a comforting presence that made me feel safe and cherished. We took our time, savoring every moment as we navigated this new territory. There was no rush, just an understanding that we were discovering each other in the most intimate way possible. Every kiss, every touch felt like an invitation to delve deeper into our emotions, to understand the depths of our connection. The world outside faded away, and all that mattered was the gentle ebb and flow of our bodies, the soft whispers of our breaths as we lost ourselves in each other. It was a celebration of everything we had shared, the laughter, the tears, the moments that had brought us to this point. In that space, we were free to be ourselves, free to explore the depths of our desires without fear of judgment. I leaned down, pressing my lips against his, and it was like fireworks went off in my head. Each kiss was a little exploration, both tender and passionate. I wanted to show him how much I cared and how much this moment meant to me. I could sense his eagerness, the way he responded to my touch, and it felt like we were both opening up to each other in ways we had never done before. And then, unexpectedly, he dropped to his knees before me. I was taken aback for a moment. He looked so intent, so focused. As he looked up at me, his expression was a mix of eagerness and reverence that struck me. It was clear that he wanted to take this moment further, and honestly, I was all in. Watching him as he leaned in was incredible. His warm breath brushed against my skin, sending a shiver down my spine. There was something so intimate about the way he was looking at me, like I was the only thing that mattered in that moment. I felt a rush of affection and desire wash over me, igniting everything between us. When he began to do this, I was overwhelmed, not just by the physical sensations, but by how deep our connection felt. It wasn't just about the act itself, it felt like we were sharing something sacred. His movements were attentive, and I could tell he was genuinely invested in making this special for both of us. As he focused on me, I lost track of everything else. It was just him and me, and the world outside didn't matter anymore. I could feel the way he took his time, how he seemed to savor every moment, and it made me feel seen in a way I hadn't before. It was incredible to witness his enthusiasm, his willingness to explore this side of our relationship, and it only fueled my desire to connect even more. I found myself lost in the sensations he was creating, every touch igniting a spark. I couldn't believe how amazing it felt to have someone like him there, so willing to embrace this intimacy with me. I tangled my fingers in his hair, guiding him gently, encouraging him to continue exploring, and in return, he looked up at me with a mix of passion and affection that took my breath away. As we navigated this new territory together, I felt a rush of emotions swelling inside me. There was an overwhelming sense of trust, gratitude, and a growing affection that I hadn't anticipated. It was as if all those late-night talks and shared vulnerabilities had led us to this point, and now we were both fully committed to the moment. I could see how much this meant to him too. It wasn't just about physical pleasure, it was about the connection we were forging. With every movement, every kiss, we were breaking down barriers and revealing more of ourselves to each other. I had never felt so connected to anyone before, and it was both thrilling and comforting at the same time. As we reached that peak together, I felt a rush of warmth flood through me. It was like everything we had shared was culminating in this one beautiful moment. I could see it reflected in his eyes, the joy, the surprise, the connection, and it made everything feel so right. I knew, in that instant, that this was just the beginning of something special between us. When it was over, I couldn't help but smile. I had no idea what the future held, but I knew we had crossed a line together, and it felt good. It felt real. The intimacy we shared in that moment was something I would always cherish. The morning light filtered through the curtains, warming the room and slowly pulling me from my sleep. I blinked a few times, my mind still hazy, but then it hit me like a ton of bricks. Carl was still here, and we had shared something incredible the night before. My heart raced as I turned to my side and saw him sleeping next to me, his curly hair tousled and his body relaxed. It was such a beautiful sight, but it also made me feel uneasy. I quietly slipped out of bed, careful not to wake him, and made my way to the shower. The warm water cascaded over me, and I let out a sigh, trying to process everything. What had happened between us felt surreal, like a fever dream. Part of me was over the moon about it, but another part was freaking out. Was it really a good idea? What if we ruined our friendship? I couldn't shake the thought that maybe it was all just a mistake, a wild moment of passion that would end up complicating everything. As I washed my hair, I found myself lost in a whirlwind of emotions. I recalled how it felt to be so close to Carl, the way our bodies moved together, the way he looked at me with those expressive eyes. There was a tenderness to our encounter that I couldn't ignore, but I was still unsure. What if this changed everything between us? I didn't want to lose the connection we already had. By the time I finished my shower and dried off, I was still a bundle of nerves. I dressed quickly, trying to shake off the confusion. When I returned to the living room, Carl was already awake, scrolling through his phone like nothing had happened. We exchanged casual small talk, both of us pretending that our world had not shifted in the span of a single night. It was a strange dance, one where we both knew what had happened but avoided addressing it outright. The rest of the day was a blur of awkward moments mixed with familiar laughter. We went out for lunch and spent the afternoon watching TV, but every glance we shared held an undercurrent of tension. I could feel the weight of what had transpired lingering in the air between us, and it made me anxious. As night fell, I was lying in my room, trying to focus on anything but the storm of thoughts swirling in my head. I was exhausted from overthinking everything, and I could feel sleep pulling me under. Just as I was starting to drift off, I felt the familiar weight of someone getting into bed beside me. My eyes flew open, and I turned to see Carl leaning against me, his warmth radiating into my side. He wrapped his arms around me, pulling me close in a gentle embrace. It felt so natural, so right. I closed my eyes again, leaning into his body, letting the comfort wash over me. Then I heard him whisper, soft and earnest, "Last night was the best night of my life. I want more." His words sent a rush of warmth through me. My heart raced again, but this time it was a different kind of nervousness, an excitement mixed with vulnerability. I turned slightly to look at him, and the look on his face was earnest, full of longing and sincerity. In that moment, everything shifted again. I felt a wave of emotions crashing over me, relief, desire, and that familiar connection I had felt before. It was like he was giving me permission to explore what we had started, to dive deeper into this intimacy we had begun to uncover. In the dim light of the room, I could see the way he was looking at me. There was a softness in his gaze, a spark of something that went beyond mere attraction. It was as if we were both acknowledging the unspoken bond that had formed between us, one that transcended friendship and flirtation. I was nervous, but the excitement of being this close to him was intoxicating. Out of nowhere, Carl shifted slightly, his expression turning from sweet and gentle to a more playful one. I noticed the way his eyes lit up, and it was clear he had something in mind. Then, without a word, he climbed on top of me, a move that caught me a bit off guard. My heart raced as he positioned himself above me, and I couldn't help but be struck by how confident he seemed in that moment. "Now, I want to control the process," he said softly, his voice laced with a mix of determination and tenderness. There was something about the way he said it that made my stomach flip. I could see that he was ready to take charge, and honestly, I was all in. It felt like a natural progression, and I was more than happy to let him take the lead. As he settled down, I surrendered to him completely. There was a thrill in giving up control, and I felt an exhilarating mix of excitement and vulnerability. His body pressed against mine, and I could feel the heat radiating from him. It was as if all the tension from earlier melted away, replaced by this new, electrifying connection. Carl was incredibly gentle as he started to explore. His hands found mine, clasping them softly but firmly, creating a sense of intimacy that sent shivers down my spine. I could feel the strength in his grip, yet there was a softness that reassured me. He wasn't just being assertive, he was attentive to my every reaction, checking in with his eyes as if to ask if I was okay. With our hands intertwined, I felt anchored, grounded. His breath was warm against my skin, and the sensation sent a wave of pleasure coursing through me. I could feel the rhythm of his breathing sync up with my own, and it was like we were creating our own little world, just the two of us. I didn't want to break that spell, it was too perfect. As he leaned down, I could see his face hovering above mine, his features illuminated by the soft glow of the night. The anticipation in the air was palpable, and I couldn't help but bite my lip, feeling a mix of nervousness and excitement. His gaze locked onto mine, and I could see a flicker of mischief in his eyes. I knew he was savoring this moment just as much as I was. He shifted slightly, and I felt him nestle closer, our bodies molding together in a way that felt so right. I could feel the warmth radiating from him, the softness of his skin pressing against mine. There was a delicious tension in the air, like a tightrope walk between excitement and tenderness. Carl's movements were slow and deliberate, as if he was savoring every moment. He began to kiss me softly, trailing his lips down my neck, and it felt like every nerve in my body was alive. I closed my eyes, letting the sensations wash over me. His kisses were gentle, but there was a hunger in them that made my heart race. I felt his breath against my skin, warm and intoxicating, sending shivers through me. The way he held my hands down on the bed made me feel both restrained and cherished. I loved the way he was taking control, guiding me through this new experience. It was thrilling to let him take the reins, to feel so desired and cared for at the same time. He was showing me just how deeply he wanted to connect, and it made my chest swell with affection. His hands slowly roamed over my body, exploring every inch with a feather-light touch. I could feel the electricity sparking between us, each movement igniting a fire that spread through my veins. It was an intoxicating mix of pleasure and intimacy, and I found myself losing track of time, completely caught up in the moment. As he continued to explore, his touch grew bolder, but he never lost that gentle quality. I could feel the way his fingers traced along my sides, creating a path of warmth wherever he went. Each caress made my skin tingle, and I found myself arching into him, craving more of his touch. Carl's kisses moved from my neck back up to my lips, and this time they were more passionate. It was like he was pouring all his feelings into that kiss, and I felt myself melting under the weight of it. Our mouths moved in perfect harmony, and it felt like we were dancing together, our bodies swaying to an unspoken rhythm. In those moments, it wasn't just about physical connection, it was emotional too. I could feel us opening up to each other in ways I hadn't expected. Each kiss was layered with meaning, each touch a promise of more to come. It was beautiful and intense, and I didn't want it to end. I felt his hands release mine for a moment, and I nearly panicked, but then I realized he was simply repositioning himself. He moved down slightly, trailing soft kisses along my collarbone, then further down my chest. The sensation sent waves of pleasure coursing through me. I could hardly believe how good it felt. It was as if he was unlocking parts of me I didn't even know existed. He was exploring my body with an eagerness that made me feel cherished. His lips and hands were everywhere, and I was completely lost in the sensations. I could feel his breath hitch slightly as he discovered new spots that made me shiver with delight. It was exhilarating, and I could tell he was fully invested in making sure I felt good. There was something so intimate about this exploration. It wasn't just physical, it was like we were sharing pieces of ourselves that we had kept hidden for so long. In that moment, nothing else mattered. The world outside faded away, and all I could focus on was the connection we were building together. Now right that he sped up, and it even became a little painful for me, but over time the pain was replaced by pleasure. After everything that had just happened, I found myself lying there in a mix of disbelief and euphoria. It was surreal, really. I was still wrapped up in the moment, our bodies intertwined, and the room quiet except for the sound of our breaths. I couldn't help but replay the last few hours in my head, trying to process what we had just shared. Carl was lying next to me, his warmth radiating against my skin. I turned to look at him, and he met my gaze with this goofy, contented smile that made my heart race all over again. It was one of those moments where everything felt right, and I realized just how much I cared for him. It wasn't just physical. There was something deeper happening here. I had crossed a line with my best friend, and while that usually seemed like a recipe for disaster, somehow it felt different. It felt good. As we lay there in silence, I felt this wave of vulnerability wash over me. The intimacy we had just shared felt like it had changed everything. We were no longer just friends. We had connected in a way that made everything else fade into the background. I felt a rush of emotions, happiness, relief, and a little bit of fear about what this meant for us moving forward. Carl shifted slightly, and I could feel his fingers brushing against my chest, tracing little patterns. It sent a shiver through me. It was tender, almost like he was trying to memorize every inch of me. I couldn't help but smile back at him, feeling a mixture of pride and nervousness. This was new territory for us, and while I was excited, I was also terrified about what would come next. In that quiet moment, I thought about how we had both been in similar situations, struggling with our identities, feeling isolated. Now, here we were, connecting in a way that was more than just physical. It was raw and real. The laughter we shared earlier seemed insignificant compared to the bond we were building now. I could feel a sense of belonging wash over me. It was like all the insecurities and doubts I usually carried around just melted away. Carl and I had been friends for so long, but this was a new level. I didn't want to rush things or put labels on what we had just experienced, but I knew that whatever this was, it felt right. Carl turned to me, his expression shifting from one of joy to something more serious. It became clear he was grappling with the implications of our night together. In that moment, I understood that the connection we had just formed wasn't just a spontaneous act. It was fraught with complexities and potential consequences. He asked me not to tell his dad about what had happened between us. The request hit me with a wave of understanding. I could see how this might complicate things for him. The last thing I wanted was to add any stress to his life, especially when we had just begun to explore our feelings for each other. The moment felt heavy, charged with emotions that went beyond mere physicality. It was about the trust we had built, the raw honesty we were starting to share. I respected his wish for privacy, fully aware that this was a delicate situation for both of us. In that silent agreement, a sense of relief washed over him. I could see it in the way his shoulders relaxed and his gaze softened. I felt grateful that he trusted me with this part of himself, this secret that had the potential to affect not just our lives, but also his relationship with his family. We both knew we had crossed a line, but it felt like we had also opened a door to something new and beautiful. As the weight of his request hung in the air, I reflected on how much our connection had deepened in such a short time. The next day brought with it a mix of anticipation and anxiety. My brother was coming to pick Carl up, and I felt a knot tighten in my stomach as I prepared for the encounter. I had spent the morning trying to shake off the memories of the previous night, the connection we'd forged, and the feelings that swirled between us. It was all still fresh, and I wasn't entirely sure how to face Carl again in the light of day. As I heard the sound of my brother's car pulling into the driveway, a rush of embarrassment washed over me. The kind of embarrassment that makes you want to disappear or hide away from the world. I knew I couldn't act as if everything was normal. We both understood that what had happened was significant, but it felt like a fragile secret I was scared to acknowledge. When my brother walked through the door, he was his usual upbeat self. He had a warmth that made it easy to be around him, and I loved him deeply. I was especially fond of Carl, who had always been a bright spot in my life. But now, things felt different, and I wasn't quite sure how to navigate this new territory. I caught Carl's eye, and for a moment, we exchanged a look that spoke volumes, an unspoken acknowledgement of the night before. It was a moment that made my heart race and my cheeks flush. Despite everything, there was still a sense of closeness, a bond that had formed between us that was hard to ignore. As we settled into small talk, I could feel the tension in the room. I wanted to say something to address what had happened, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, we both played along, pretending as if nothing had changed. I focused on my brother, his laughter, and the stories he shared about his day, trying to divert my mind from the emotions swirling just beneath the surface. Eventually, my brother turned to Carl, and they exchanged a few playful jabs. I found comfort in their banter, a reminder of the easy camaraderie we shared as a family. Yet, beneath that comfort was a nagging sense of guilt. I loved my brother and valued the bond we had. I couldn't let this secret come between us, especially not over something that felt like a fleeting moment in the grand scheme of life. When it was time for Carl to leave, I felt a pang of sadness mixed with relief. Part of me wanted to hold onto the connection we'd discovered, but the other part knew that it was likely a one-time experience. We both had our lives to lead, and while our paths had crossed in a significant way, I understood that it was best left in the past. As they headed out the door, I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the secret settle in my chest. I promised myself to cherish the moments we had shared while keeping this chapter closed, at least for now. I watched them drive away, knowing that I would always love my brother and his son, but also recognizing that some things are best kept hidden, if only to preserve the relationships that matter most.